Dejounte Murray has been traded to the Atlanta Hawks for Danilo Gallinari and 4 first-round picks. I know it's been a little bit over a month since that trade occurred, but man, it took me a while as a Spurs fan to process it. And no, I think when you look at the trade at face value, it looks like a great trade. And I think this is one of those rare scenarios where the trade is both a great idea and a bad idea all at the same time. And let's talk about it. I think at face value, the Spurs just cashed in on a 25-year-old Dejounte Murray who's only made one All-Star game in his career. He was at the peak of his value. He still has 2 years remaining on his contract. He's a great value contract right now at about $16 million per year for the next 2 years. He put up career numbers last year with 21 points, about 8 rebounds, 8 assists per game, and his value's never been higher. If you wait another year to deal Murray, he's 1 year closer to just being able to walk in free agency. Maybe teams are less willing to go pay for Dejounte Murray out in the market when he's got 1 year left on his deal. And then when you get 2 years down the road, maybe as a 27-year-old, either A, he walks in free agency, or B, um, you re-sign him to a massive contract, and if you're still a middling team at that point, does it really make sense to sign Dejounte Murray to a 40+ million dollar contract at that point in time if the team isn't winning? And so when you look at it from that perspective, it really made sense to the Spurs to cash in. I mean, they get great value back for a guy who just made his first All-Star team, has shown flashes but hasn't been a superstar by any stretch of the imagination. To get 3 first-round picks, now granted the 2023 Charlotte pick a is a protected pick, it's top 16 protected, but to get 2 unprotected picks in 25 and 27 from the Atlanta Hawks after DeJounte's deal runs out with the Hawks, where theoretically he may not even be on the team anymore, and then another draft swap in 2026. That's really, really good value for DeJounte Murray. But at the same time, I mean, you look at that and it's a great return on investment. But then there's the people aspect of it. And I think what is often missed in today's NBA, and what makes it really hard as a fan to see this trade go through, is when you're a small market and you're one of these smaller teams, having a player that truly cares about the city and wants to stay is really a big deal. I mean, if we look at it in recent memory, a lot of the players who have come up in small markets have won it out pretty quickly. I mean, Anthony Davis was with the Pelicans for what, 6, 8 years, and he was done. Kevin Durant, Oklahoma City, Jets for the Warriors. Um, you know, all across the board, we have these young stars who it seems like as soon as they're done with their first contract, their first big rookie extension, they're looking to go play elsewhere. And while DeJounte Murray may not be on the level of a Kevin Durant or an Anthony Davis, he really all the signs pointed to him really wanting to stay in San Antonio, and that has to count for something. He was a leader of this young group. It was very clear that the players on the team looked up to him as the leading figure. I mean, I remember when he came into the league as like a 21-year-old point guard. Um, LaMarcus Aldridge in a game was barking at the refs, was super upset, and Pop was going to try and settle him down. And DeJounte looks over at Pop, waves him away, and says, "No, Pop, I got this." To have that type of a leader on your team, I think is massive, especially when you're trying to grow and maintain a culture that has been there going back to Tim Duncan and David Robinson all the way back and when Robinson was drafted in '89. Dejounte really embodied that culture. He was um, had an incredible work ethic. He was always at the gym. He took all the young guys under his wing and pushed them and helped them show them the ropes by all accounts. And that's gone. Now, you shift and you still have Keldon Johnson and Devin Vassell on the team. But DeJounte was really, for all intents and purposes, appeared to be that leader. And more importantly, I mean, I think we saw this in his Instagram post when he left the Spurs. He loves San Antonio. And while we may take for granted as Spurs fans that Tim Duncan was here for his entire career and he was He stayed in San Antonio his entire career. He loved it here. He was a lifelong Spur. Even Tim Duncan almost left in free agency in 2001. Let's we not forget, he was flirting with going and teaming up with T-Mac and Grant Hill and Doc Rivers or in Orlando. And if it weren't for a last-minute decision, he might have been gone. So, even the greatest player in franchise history was almost gone. So, when you find a player that loves your city and wants to stick around, that's got to mean something. And you may point to the fact that DeJounte had only made one All-Star team, but I also point to the fact that this guy has grown every single year at different aspects of his game. I remember his rookie year, he averaged 3 points a game, looked like a little bit of a deer in the headlights in the playoffs, and then he slowly grew and grew. And by his second season, he was second team all defense. He was the youngest player ever to make an all defensive team. And people kind of chalked it up to, hey, maybe he's just gonna be a good defensive player in this league. He, maybe has a little bit of a loose dribble, doesn't have much of a jump shot yet, was maybe a little out of control when driving to the basket. He tears his ACL in his third season and kind of gets written off a little bit. And then he comes back and he slowly builds and builds and builds and is not the primary ball handler behind DeMar DeRozan for a couple years, and then finally he gets to run the show the last year, and he completely blossoms. He's a 20 plus point a game scorer. He's at like 8 points, 8 assists, 8 rebounds per game, and he makes his first All Star team. And look, it's hard to project continual growth for these players, but when you see somebody with a work ethic like DeJounte, that's the type of player you want to count, and you like to think you could count on growing into the future. I mean, I think not to liken back to him too much, but Kawhi Leonard was a great example of this. He came into the league and he was, a solid defensive player, and he had a decent 3 point shot initially, that corner 3 point shot, and he slowly but surely worked on his game and whittled away and became this refined scoring machine by his sixth, seventh year in the league, and it looked like Dejounte was really on the way to that. Now, was he ever going to be at Kawhi's level? Maybe not. But in today's NBA, to have a 6'5" point guard that could guard multiple positions, who was a good passer, unselfish player, and was a good mid-range shooter. I know he had his flaws with 3 point shooting. He wasn't the greatest shooter, but he showed a capability of being able to hit those shots in close games down the stretch of last year. And look, I'm not going to sit here and say that the team was great last year, but and weren't they fun? Didn't they kind of seem to slowly figure things out towards the end of last season? And I know we would like to point to the playing game of how it was this massive failure, and yeah, it was disappointing. But I mean, bear in mind, Dejounte Murray, their best player, was out for about 2 weeks with a sickness where he lost, anywhere from I think 5 to 10 pounds, and then he was coming back not fully recovered yet, trying to play that game, and he kind of just ran out of gas when he by the end of that one tried to play through it. And just was really inefficient. I mean, it's a one game sample size. It's kind of hard to take too much away from that given the circumstances. But as a Spurs fan, I think getting to see him play alongside Keldon and Vassell and the rest of those guys, I think it would have been just plain fun. And look, the Spurs have clearly picked a direction. I think this is something we've been waiting for them to do for a while. I mean, back when they made the Kawhi Leonard trade, they kind of seemed to want to try and balance this present and future all at the same time by reloading with DeMar, while also trying to develop DeJounte and Derek and Keldon and Vassell at the same time. And it seemed like they were kind of walking this tightrope. They never bought in one way, went all in, pushed the chips to the table to try and win a championship, and never completely flipped the rebuild switch. And I guess that's kind of the silver lining of this trade is the Spurs have really turned the page and said, hey, we're committed to rebuilding. We want to get our best chance we can to get this Victor Wembanyama, who by all accounts has the potential to be a superstar. He's a 7'3", can dribble, can shoot, um, crazy athletic. But I mean, even if you could have the worst record in the league, you're not guaranteed the top pick. You're only guaranteed a 14% shot. But at the very least, the Spurs are picking their direction, and by no means are they devoid of talent at this point. I think there are overreactions that they're just going to be completely helpless this year, and I think that's far from the case. I mean, Dejounte has leaves a massive void in this team. And they don't really have a great point guard option. I mean, Trey Jones um, was a very solid backup last year, but he's no Dejounte Murray. But I mean, maybe he can run the show. And then you expect Keldon Johnson and Devin Vassell are going to continue to grow in their roles. Um, but look, as a Spurs fan, as a Dejounte Murray fan, this trade sucks. It sucked. I will say I sat here and I was devastated seeing that he got traded. And so that's that. I mean, that's where I come from with saying, look, I think this was a great trade and it was a bad trade all at the same time. It was maybe the right move and the wrong at exactly the same point. There are both sides of the coin, but at least we can say moving forward is the Spurs have picked a direction. They're committed to growing these young guys. They have the I think second or third youngest roster in the league, and you know what? Maybe they're not going to be a playoff team next year, but they're building towards something, and that's important as Spurs fans. Is look, let's trust this organization. There's been a few lean years since the Kawhi debacle, but all in all, I mean, they've developed that's now three 29th picks in the draft into meaningful NBA players in Derek White, Dejounte Murray, and Keldon Johnson. That's got to count for something. This developmental staff hasn't really missed outside of a Luka Shamanich over the past 5 years. I mean, are there any great stars out of the players they've drafted? Maybe not, but they haven't. It's not like they've been drafting at the top of the lottery. So as a Spurs fan, I say, look, got to take the good with the bad here. We love DeJounte. He was an important and great part of this team. But I'm excited to see what Keldon and Devin can do in the future, and maybe we'll see some Josh Primo at point. Um, I'm excited for the kid, and it'll be cool to see what these guys can do. There's gonna be a lot of growing pains. It's gonna be a tough season in some parts. They're probably gonna be very similar to last year. I mean, they had a positive net rating all of last year and still were well under 500. So excited to see. Really sad to see Dejounte gone. He meant a lot to San Antonio, and even though they didn't win much during his tenure, I think he was one of the most fun Spurs players I've watched. Watching that guy grow from the guy who was scared of Patrick Beverly in that playoff series in I believe it was 2017 to now being a blossoming star. It's been an incredible journey. I wish DeJounte well in Atlanta, and man, I wish he could have stayed in San Antonio. But uh, like I said, the right move and the wrong move all at the same time.